All right, welcome back to another episode of the Blasters and Blades podcast. So, hey there, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies, a place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. The place. See, I even speak sometimes. So, without further ado, we're going to introduce you to our guests. We have with us Larry Correia. So, Larry, can you introduce yourself to people that live in, I don't know, an igloo who might not know who you are?
Hi, I'm the author of the Monster Hunter International series and the Grim Nor Chronicles and the Dead Six thrillers, along with Mike Coopery, and also the Saga of the Forgotten Warrior epic fantasy series, and a bunch of other stuff. So that's me. I've been a writer for about 12 years now, and thoroughly enjoy this stuff, sci-fi and fantasy.
All right. And before we start talking to John, we're going to say how we first met them. So, Cisca, how did you first meet Larry? I'm guessing probably not booze this time.
No, actually. So it's funny because I actually read a blog that Larry somehow came across my Facebook feed, and I'd heard about Larry, and I'd heard that he wrote these really great books that just snagged John Ringo's brain and took it on a wild goose ride. But I read a blog that he wrote during a couple elections ago talking about how the New York Times was being so judgy about whether or not certain candidates looked Hispanic enough. And you really said it the way I felt it, because I grew up. I have my full first name is Hispanic, and I'm Hispanic on my mom's side. But as we can see, I don't look like the stereotype. So I'd grown up with that kind of treatment a lot of my life. And so it was really neat to find an author who did, and who was calling out major media for being a bunch of racist jerks. So when I met Larry, I had a complete fan moment, and I lost my brain, forgot how to speak. And I literally sat there and poked my hand trying to set the reset button in my brain. And Larry just looked at me and he's like, "Are you okay?"
So I actually met Larry at HonorCon, the last one they did. What was it, 2016, 2017?
Sounds about right.
And we were, my mom and I, the Sunday, everyone was packing up his last day of the con. And we were having breakfast because, why pay when they give it to you for free at the hotel? And you just invited yourself into the table and joined us for breakfast, and it was glorious. So this is the best meal crasher we ever had. But
yeah, the writers just got to find a place to sit, So
I understand, and free bacon is free bacon. So
heck yeah.
So John, we don't normally. This is the first time we've had co-authors on together. So how did you first meet Larry?
Larry and I were at a convention in Salt Lake City. He was a new author. He had just gotten his deal with Bain Books. And I was a new author. I just had published a book with Tor Books. And we were on this panel with, of all people, David Farland. And they asked us what we were doing, or what our day jobs were, or whatever. And I said, well, I got my master's degree in accounting. And Dave Farland said, well, I used to be an accountant. And Larry's like, well, I'm an accountant. And so after that, so we laughed, and we told the audience that the key to getting published was to be an accountant. After that, Dave and I were doing a book tour, and we had a number of them scheduled, and we had an open slot. And I was like, let's get the other accountant. Let's go with Larry. And so that's how we met. And we did our first book tour was down to the San Diego area. It was fun. It was a good time. So that's how Larry and I met.
And I'm sure you kept all the receipts for purposes.
Yes.
All right. So does that make sense to you, Larry? Does that jive with your memory?
That sounds about right. And then after that, me and John went out on several other book tour little trips together. This is back before publishers would pay us to go on book tour, and so we would just do it on our own. And we did Arizona together. We did Colorado together, where we would just drive from Utah and then hit every single bookstore in a major metro area. The one in Colorado, we almost died because we caught a blizzard leaving Denver, and we drove the entire way across Wyoming in this blizzard, trying to beat it home before they shut down I-80. and it took I think about 16 hours. Yeah, every minute of it, I actually had heart palpitations because of the terror.
We're two big guys, and we're stuffed into this little Ford Focus, and the wind's blowing. It was like an odyssey. We were going down the freeway, and we see this semi off to the side that's on fire, right? And we keep going, and then a little bit later, there's another semi. There's an elk that had been hit. Some dude had left his truck, and he was over there trying to saw the horns off. I looked up. I swear that truck was still moving forward, just rolling a little bit forward. So it was an interesting trip. I just have to say, interesting trip.
That was a fun one.
Yeah.
Did that make it into a book, and then it's all tax deductible?
Well, it's tax deductible anyway.
All right. And so, Cisca, well, first off, John Brown, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I write action thrillers and epic fantasies. So I've got a series, a Frank Shaw series. It's action thriller. He's an ex-con that's trying to go straight. And then Tor published me. I debuted with epic fantasy and had a series there, and I'm working on another series. And then I guess now I'm doing science fiction as well. So whatever, bring it on. Larry Romance is next.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
Monster Hunter edition romance? Like you can mix the Regency body stripper with Monster Hunter. You can make
just as long as it has guns in it and action. I think we're all right.
Well, he has a friend who writes for a lot of romance.
If I wanted to make a lot of money, I'm friends with Laurel Hamilton. I'd see if hey, Laurel, you want to do a Monster Hunter romance? Yeah, that would pay off my house.
Yeah, it might be her. Anita Lake's a bit off-brand for MIA.
Yeah, a little.
Okay. So, Cisca, we're going to ask this question next. So, how did you first hear or meet John?
I got told, hey, there's a brand new book Larry's coming out with. And I went, oh, cool. I'll go get the e-arc. And so I went and got the e-arc. And I went, wait. First I went, wait, this isn't fantasy. I just went and got the book because I knew I liked Larry's work. And then I went, okay, this is cool. And so...
All right.
But, so it was by picking up Larry's new book, Gunrunner, which we're here to talk about.
So I was told to show up here because Cisca bosses me around all the time for this podcast. And so when I found out the book, I started looking him up. But I will say, if you haven't read his website, we'll link to it after the show. It'll be linked in the show notes. His About Me section is hilarious. I was laughing, by the way, at your bio of yourself. So well done. Most of the time, people, they bore me to tears when they write their bio. It's either too short, so I don't know what I just read, or it's too long, and then you just dude, pare it down a little bit. Yours was long, but it was hilarious, so you win the internet today, sir.
All right. Good job.
All right. The next question is yours, Cisca.
What? Oh, yes. So, on to religion of sorts. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
You got to tell them which one you're asking because there's two of them now.
Okay, well, we're going to go with John.
Firefly.
Okay.
Larry?
That's an acceptable answer.
Honestly, Firefly is the best overall, and but it's also really short, and so I've also got a lot of enjoyment out of Star Wars over the years because there's more of it. But also, a lot of it's a lot worse.
It's true. But I did grow up reading those, so it's a good answer, Star Wars.
Well, yeah, I mean, because if there had been a series of kick-ass Timothy Zahn novels about Firefly, that'd be hands down. But
wait. You know people. Could you make that happen for us?
No, I'm pretty sure I'm on Joss Whedon's do not call list.
Okay.
Well, the next
Star Wars wins for the epic feel. I mean, come on, you can't compete with that. But Firefly's got a lot of junkyard dog coolness about it.
Oh yeah, totally,
yeah.
Totally.
So on to the fantasy religion. Do you like? Is it Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, or Tolkien?
What was the last one?
Tolkien, like Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings.
That is the right answer. So well done.
Yes,
Hands
and the
down.
elves are the correct height.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed Harry Potter. Game of Thrones, I only read the first book, and this is way before the TV show came along. And I read the first book, and I just it wasn't my thing. You know, I like heroes in my fantasy, and this was just like victims and thugs and people victimizing each other, and it wasn't my thing.
It's very grimdark.
I got through the first book. The second book petered out for me. I'm sure we're going to have somebody who wants to like explain to me how I'm so wrong, and they're welcome to some other time.
Yeah, they can. I wouldn't care.
So,
Right.
So if you want to tell us that, you can follow us at the Facebook group, Blasters and Blades Podcast, or any of the other platforms that will be linked to in the comment section.
yes.
Doc
So-
would love to hear from you.
What?
I said I'm
yeah.
sure you would love to hear from them.
Sure. You can write all hate mail to Nick at Blasters and Blades Podcast because he missed the show. So going into what is it that you love about the science fiction and fantasy genre? Larry, we're gonna alternate.
Oh man, it's always been my thing. Well, I mean, I started out as a kid with westerns. Was the first thing I was ever into reading, and a lot of history. But the very first gateway drug for me was Sword of Shannara. Actually, Elfstones was the first one I read because we got it out of a yard sale, and I loved it. I love fantasy, and I never looked back. Discovered D&D when I was a little bit older. Love fantasy novels growing up. I was probably in high school before I read Tolkien for the first time. Back then it was Eddings, Feist, pretty much everything. And then so I actually got into fantasy before I got into sci-fi. Loved them both forever. And then I was better at fantasy writing at first, so that's what I went into first. So the first book I ever wrote was actually an action adventure thriller that never got published because it sucked. So that's actually the first thing I ever tried. But was the question, do I have to choose between fantasy or sci-fi?
No, just what you like about each one.
Okay, good.
So you answered it.
So, and then he answered the next question was which one came first for you?
Oh, my bad.
Now John gets
I
to
see
answer.
it over there, Larry. So John.
Yeah. I love the adventure and the peril, and of course the mythical creatures. There's Tolkien once talked about the effect of that distant tower, and there's that thing out there that you can see but you can't quite reach. And I think there's part of that fantasy. There's just this magical effect of this this new cool legendary, this epic thing out there. And Tolkien did that so well. He did that with all the history. He did it with the Entwives, right? He brings them up, and man, you'd love to know more about it, but then he just doesn't give it to you. So there are a lot of those things that I love about fantasy and science fiction. I don't know. I love them both. I probably lean towards fantasy. My big thing was The Hobbit when it first came out, when it aired on TV, that Rankin and Bass animated series. So in fact, it's kind of a funny story. I came home from school. This is back in the day before DVDs, back before VHS, DVR, all of that, right? We had one TV, and you had to schedule it. Like we had times. I had 4 sisters, and you had to schedule it. And my sister comes home from school, and she says, "We got to watch The Hobbit." My teacher said we got to watch The Hobbit, and I was like, "Hobbit? That's like some romance. Are you kidding me?" And it was during my time, and I was like, "We're not watching The Hobbit during my time. I'm not watching any romance." And she said, No, there's dragons. And I said, "No way, The Hobbit, get out of here." And sure enough, there were dragons. Changed my life forever, man.
Now, did she like it too?
She loved it, yeah.
That's awesome.
And hopefully she got a passing grade on whatever that was for.
Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah, for sure.
Although that's the perfect excuse if it wasn't for school to just say it was.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
if she was being sneaky, points to her because that's creative. All right. So how did your love of science fiction and fantasy transition into you actually writing stories in it? We'll go to you, John.
Well, so there's The Hobbit, and Rankin and Bass produced a bunch of other things that I loved as a kid. The Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Santa Claus is Coming to all that kind of stop motion animation. And I wanted to be an animator. And so I worked as a kid saving money for a movie camera. This is back in the day when it was like $800. And $800 was a lot of money back then, right? And I got plans for an animation stand. So I wanted to be an animator. And we went on a trip. My mother and my grandmother were doing this Middle Eastern tour, and they wanted me to come along. I was in 9th grade. And my camera, so I took my camera along, of course, and it got caught in a conveyor belt in Athens, Greece, and it crunched my camera. And it was like the death of my animator dreams. Because I was like, I'm not going to be able to get another $800 at the time. So that was the first. And then later on in college, I was like, you know what? I'm going to write. I'm going to write. So, but that's what started it, man. Rankin Bass is who started it for me.
What about you, Larry? So how did liking to read or watch, etc., or play games in the sci-fi fantasy realm transition into you writing your first story?
Actually, it's kind of funny. So like I said, I love fantasy and sci-fi. It was primarily what I read in my formative years, and then went off to college, and I decided to write I was going to try to write a book for the first time, and what actually set me over the edge, and I think why I wound up trying to write a thriller was the very first thing I ever wrote. Was I was on a Tom Clancy kick, and then also I had just read this bestseller. It was the #1 best-selling novel on the New York Times, and I won't name it. I've met the author since. He's actually a nice guy, but this book sucked. I mean, it was so bad. This book was just horrid. It was this thriller, and it got made into a major movie. And I read the book, and it was just so awful. And then so I thought, oh, surely this is an anomaly. So I checked out from the library another book by the same thriller author, and it was worse. And I took that, and I went to my wife, and I said, hey, if this guy could be the #1 best-selling author in America, I could get published. But then I wrote my first book in school, and it kind of sucked because, it's your first book. You don't really know what you're doing. And I actually, I want to put it on the shelf. Then for about 10 years, I didn't write. I went out and had a career and did other stuff. And it wasn't until many years later that I decided to write again. And that time I tried to write fantasy, and that's when I wrote Monster Hunter. And it's just kind of taken off from there.
Okay. Good answer. All right. So you guys have both touched on what it was that you loved for sci-fi or fantasy, but let's be more specific. And so what was the first property that you remember, either science fiction or fantasy, that you grabbed you and said, this is a whole new world for me and I'm hooked? So we're gonna go with you first, John, because I see you stroking your chin.
Well, I grew up with all sorts of movies and everything else. Monster Theater, where I was living, every Friday night there was Monster Theater, and you'd have all of the, Creature from the Black Lagoon and all that stuff. But I think the time that it really hit me was I watched The Hobbit, and then just at the end of that school year, my father owned a huge floral and nursery business, and he would go every year to California to work with the national FTD florist organization. He'd take my mom with her, and they would select the arrangements or help select the arrangements that FTD would feature that year. And they'd farm us out to all of our neighbors, right? All 5 of us kids. And so school was still on. I was at the neighbors across the street, and I had that book, The Hobbit, with me. And I started to read it. And that morning I went up. The next morning, right, I started to read it, just got barely into it. The next morning, I went up to the neighbor, the neighbor ladies, the neighbor wife, the mom, whatever you want to call it, neighbor mom. And I was like, oh, man, I'm sick. I can't go to school today. She's like, that's all right. You go back downstairs, and why don't you rest? So I spent the whole day reading The Hobbit, right? And then I wasn't done yet. So that night we did whatever, and I went, and she's like, "How you feeling?" I'm like, "I think I'm still sick, man." So day 2, I played hooky and read The Hobbit, and that's when things just really, changed for me. I'd kind of been a reader before that, but not really. I wasn't one of these guys. Some of these authors are like, I devoured the whole bookmobile when I was a kid. I didn't do that. But that was the triggers. J.R. Tolkien, man. I love that guy.
Okay, what about you, Larry?
Okay, I was the kid that read the whole bookmobile. But what it was is I grew up in the sticks. I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. So El Nido, California, back in the day, it was just nothing. It was like population 400. And that it was just, we were out in the country and we had this little tiny library. And I read, and it was this ancient old building. And I read like literally every book there. And because it was free, we were poor. And then I discovered the joy of interlibrary loans. I could get books from like all over the place, and I did. And I read and read and read. I read tons when I was a kid. I spent like 3 hours a day riding the school bus. I was like the first kid picked up in the morning, and like sort of long drive to school. So I read a lot, and read pretty much everything I could get my hands on. So like I said, I started out with Louis L'Amour was my first big thing that I had a page ripped out of one of his books that I kept score where I marked off all of his 120 something books that I had read, and I finally got them all. It was actually kind of fun. So the very first Baen book I ever read, I write for Baen, was in 1985. So I was 10 years old, and it was at a local supermarket back in the days when they had the spinners of paperbacks. And there was a book called Fangolith by John Dalmas. And I bought this book with my own money, which was a big deal back in those days. It was like, 85 cents or whatever. And I loved it, had a lot of fun with it. And then the second band book I got right after that was Hammer Slammers collection by David Drake. And then, fast forward about almost 30 years, and I'm one of the few people that's ever got to write in the Hammer Slammers universe officially with David Drake's permission. So, that was kind of awesome. But I've been a fan. I've been a fan there since I was 10 years old.
So is your inner 10-year-old screaming with glee?
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I'll be honest. I actually went and got a bunch of the books and reread just to write this one short story. I went and got all the big compendiums and I read through a bunch of them again just to like get freshened up to write this one short story. And it was like, wow, this is a good reminder. It's like, God, these are really good. These are really good books. So my inner 10-year-old gets to squee with glee quite a bit in this job.
Nice.
All right. And so many authors let their own real life experiences influence the stories they tell. So were there any specific formidable moments that really shaped you as a storyteller? And we'll go with you, Larry.
Well, you notice I've had a lot in many of my books. I always tend to get big dudes who are gun nuts. And I have a lot of big gun nuts in my books. For some reason, I have a lot of accountants and a lot of Portuguese people show up.
Wonder why.
Most of my series are Portuguese people just randomly show up there. So gun nuts, accountants, Mormons, Portuguese people. Yeah, so I just cram them in there. No, honestly, like as a writer, you're always borrowing from real life. You're always borrowing from people. Ideas are everywhere, and so honestly, there's tons of stuff from my life that has wound up in my books. And, anytime like your funny friends say something really cool and they're not a writer, they all know I'm going to totally steal that.
God, can you say that one more time? I got to write that down.
I was going to say, if any of my friends say anything cool, steal it. No. The bad thing is so many of my friends are writers though. So if one of them says something cool, they got first dibs.
Oh, fair enough. So have you pulled the Clive Cussler yet and written yourself into your own books?
I have once, yes. There's one series called Tom Stranger.
Yes.
Yeah. The Adventures of Tom Stranger, Interdimensional Insurance Agent. So it's a comedy series. It's super goofy. There's no hold bars. Nothing is off the table for Tom Stranger. So it gets really, really weird and serious. Really, really weird and silly. And so I am a recurring character. And then I'm Larry the writer, because there's a multiverse of like different dimensions, all interconnected. Based upon every decision ever made, there's a different universe. And so there's all these different Larry Correias in the multiverse, and I'm like the lamest of them because I'm the one that writes books. In fact, there's this one guy, the Interdimensional Lord of Hate, is like the galaxy's most powerful arms dealer. And he looks like me, only there's no gray, and he's got this long flowing mane of like heavy metal rock star hair, and he's always smoking a cigar. He keeps a hippie around just to put his cigar out on.
Nice.
So,
yeah, no, so I have Cusslered myself.
As a huge fan of that one, because it's definitely when I'm having a rough week, so I probably listen to it a lot in 2020. It's a good go-to for cheering me up and making me laugh. Are you ever going to put, other than the one short you have in print already from it? See, I am a huge fan. Are you going to put any of them in print?
So far what I've been doing is every couple years I've been able to put out another collection of short stories. That's the Target Rich Environment series.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've been doing is I've been putting at least one Tom Stranger in each one.
Okay.
So gradually they'll get there, but the Tom Stranger comes out in audio first, and then we go down the line.
Yeah, I've listened. I've read the one that you did for the LibertyCon.
Oh yeah, and that was just for LibertyCon. That one was a hoot. That was a fun one because it was very, very, very LibertyCon specific humor. I think people who don't go to LibertyCon aren't going to really get 90% of that one.
I think that's 90% of the stories in LibertyCon.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, John? Is there any specific formidable moment that shapes the kind of stories you tell?
There's not one moment that shapes it. I just know what I like, and I know what I like to write, and I know what I like to read. And so that's what goes into it. But as Larry said, all sorts of everything is just food into the story soup. And I'll tell you one of these. This was the inspiration for my first action thriller called Bad Penny. There's this, I was living in Ohio at the time, and there was this fine old dude in our church. He just very quiet. Any service project, he'd be there. He was this old guy, right? This old high priest in our church. And he had esophageal cancer. And I got this little nudge one day. You need to go record his history. Go offer to record his history. I didn't know his cancer was as advanced as it was. It was just kind of oblivious. He'd go to the hospital, and they'd take out a liter of pink fluid out of his chest cavity. And I thought, well, they've got it under control. He's going to do okay. So I went over there and offered to record his history. And at first he's like, what? Are you kidding me? No, I don't want this. A week later, he called me and said, you know what? You better come over and let's do it. And so it was just me, asking questions, interviewing him, and taping him. Well, come to find out, he'd been a bank robber. He'd gone to the penitentiary, right? Went to the big house, spent a number of years there. And he said, while he was there, he was like, I am never coming back. When I get out, I am never coming back. So he got out, started a laundromat, met this Methodist gal in this church dance, and never looked back, right? He's one of the guys that made it out. He was a terrific, funny, awesome guy. And so after talking to him, I had a different view than you would normally have about people that had gone to prison. And I thought, you know what? I want to write about a guy. My book isn't about him, but it inspired him. I want to write about a guy who's just gotten out of prison and is trying to fly straight with all of the obstacles and everything that they have. And so good old George Obrist inspired that. And that happens all the time. I mean, you get all sorts of people that inspire all sorts of things in the current book. Even if it's in a small way, Larry's got this in Gunrunner, and maybe we'll get into this, maybe we won't, but I'll veer over here right now. He's got this charity red shirt list, and he can tell you about it. But, we put in, there are all sorts of interesting people, interesting names, and interesting little tidbits about them, and we put them into this book. There were 23 when I passed it to Larry, 23 off of that list, and he added more. But everything is fodder for the story. Everything you run into. There's just so much good stuff in the world that it goes into your stories. Can't help it.
Awesome. So transitioning a little bit away, but I'm sure you could include this in your story. And I know Larry's got to have it, even though it may not be specific to Gunrunner. Have you had any crazy fan art or cosplays? We're going to start with John because I Larry's answer because I've seen him at cons.
Yeah, we know Larry's answer. I had this. There's this artist. My first book. I don't think it's crazy. There isn't anything crazy going on with it, but there's this character in my first epic fantasy book. His name is, it's an it. Its name is Hunger, and it's there's this great artist that did a rendition of that I just think is fabulous. So it's awesome when fans do stuff like that, right? Bring it to life with that or whatever else it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had a lot. It's actually kind of crazy, and it's actually as a writer, it's very humbling. I've had people show up in costume from my books, primarily Monster Hunter, because that's the easiest to cosplay. Because if you've got a bunch of tat gear laying around, then you can pretty much cosplay Monster Hunter. But I've seen some crazy ones. I've had multiple trailer park elves, families, entire families of people, lots of art, cartoons. Comics, guns. Yes, I have a lot of custom guns built based on the series. It's actually kind of amazing. And the one that gets me the most though is tattoos. Is when people do tattoos from the books onto their body, like permanent on your body tattoos. And I see that, and I'm like, man, I can't ever let these people down.
I had one of your fans. So at DragonCon, as you know, I decorate, and Bane has been wonderful enough to donate the foam core covers from the roadshow. And I had a couple of yours, but one of your fans actually showed up, and her husband was a huge fan. And she had it. My husband's a huge fan, but she's the one with the tattoo of the happy face. And you weren't there that year, but her husband had to end up leaving because of something, and it was like something bad happened in the family, and she was very nice, and she's like, do you mind because we didn't get a chance to do anything, if you're getting rid of it, I'd love to take it home. And I'm like, if you're going to transport it nicely, then sure, go ahead. Like she explained more of it to me. I'm not going to share somebody else's information, but she was adorably sweet about it, and she did have the tattoo.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, like metal art on vehicles. Like I got truck drivers that have done up Monster Hunter logos on their trucks. You know, I've got airplanes with Monster Hunter stuff. I see all the time guys in war zones sporting Monster Hunter patches, you know, hanging out the doors of Blackhawks, on manning machine guns with Monster Hunter patches on them. It's the craziest thing. And so like I said, it's one of those, it's a motivator for me not to phone anything in.
Well, the evil happy face really does kind of jive with the veteran mentality. I will say that.
It lends itself well.
So we're going to ask a couple of in the wild questions that I absolutely love. So have you been asked in the wild away from a book signing for your autograph? Somebody looked at you and went, oh, I know who you are. So Larry's already nodding his head. So we'll start there in the next, John.
Yeah, go ahead, John. You did it.
Yeah, you get that sometimes. I remember I was at the library. It wasn't a book signing. I was just going to the library as a patron, and some woman saw me, and she's like, she runs up to the librarian, and she's like, there's an author in there. There's an author in here. There's an author right over there. Right. So she was pretty excited about that. And I think it's great. To me, that shows somebody who loves books, so much that they're excited about the author. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I part of my thing too is I'm kind of distinct looking. I think I stand out in the crowd. So as far as
you are taller than most of the crowd.
Yeah, I'm pretty. John's really tall too. John's just a little shorter than I am.
Okay.
I think John, you about like 6'3" or so.
So average.
Well, I used to be almost 6'3". I've been shrinking, man.
Yeah, me too. I used to be 6'5", almost 6'6", and I think I'm.
Well, I mean,
now.
Larry can vouch for it. He's seen my siblings. He's average.
Yeah, I'm normal size by your family. No, but I've gotten that a lot. It's weird. So like there'll be times where like Bridget and I will be out eating dinner, and somebody will recognize us and they'll come over and they'll be like, oh, "Are you Larry Correia?" And it's weird because you're not in writer mode. You're not in like public persona mode. You're just kind of hanging out and doing your thing. So if I'm ever rude to anybody, I don't mean to be. It's just you caught me by surprise. It takes me a minute to mentally shift gears to be ready for that. But no, I get it. It's fun. I get it at some of the weird places too, because I get recognized in gun stores a lot.
And I bet they're super friendly when they're super armed.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, they really are. And I'm one of the only authors I know. I've done book signings at SHOT shows, so.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I get it at weird places, but it's fun. It really is fun. It's just it takes me a minute to mentally shift gears. So if you ever do catch me, just give me a minute. I'll be fine. The last one was weird. I went into a Warhammer store to buy some spray paints for priming, and it turned out I had like 10 fans there in the store at the time, and so that was weird, and it turned into like a little mini visit, and I'm not even a Warhammer guy. I'm an Infinity guy.
Yeah, I know you play Pano.
Oh yeah, I play a bunch of armies. Pano is one of my main ones, though. That's what I'm working on right now is Pano. But yeah, no. So I get it a lot. It's fun.
So,
and if you ever go to his website or whatever social media he's still on that they haven't chased him off of, he sometimes shares some pretty cool pictures of the miniatures he's painting. I don't have the hand-eye painter. I don't have the hand-eye coordination for that. I wish I could be that good, but give me a nice wall, I'll paint the hell out of it.
I painted a lot.
I'm pretty shaky, but it's actually all about it's all about technique and timing.
Well, the shaking looks great when you're dry brushing.
Oh yeah, I'm great.
So I watched a lot of the news coverage live going into when we pushed into Iraq while painting Sisters of Battle and what else.
That's awesome.
Yes. I am what happens when you keep the kid and you breed it as a gamer. But have you ever found somebody reading your book in the wild? Okay, so tell us about that. We'll let John go.
You'll you'll be a place and there'll be somebody reading your book. One time I was in a courthouse and there was a deputy sheriff with my book, servant, right? So, and I'm not going to say anything. It's just cool. It's just like, hey, there he is, right?
Oh, would have been great. Get me out of this ticket, dude.
Yeah.
I will admit that it is a guilty thing. So anytime I get on an airplane and you're filing onto the airplane and everybody's like waiting to read, everybody's reading a book in the waiting area and stuff, I always as I walk by look to see what they're reading. Just to see. And every now and then I do catch somebody reading one of mine and it's just kind of fun. And I'll always do something to the effect of I'll go, oh, Larry Correia novel? Gross. And then I'll wait to see if they recognize me.
I can see that. That would be funny. Have they recognized you when you've done that?
Yeah. Usually they do. At that point. But that is fun.
This is his.
Most of the time, it's
from your website.
That's actually my old painting station in my old house. The new one is actually way bigger.
Impressive.
I'm not even joking here. In fact, I'll pick up the camera. I'll pick up my camera just here real fast to show you. Excuse the mess. Okay, this is my current workstation.
Nice.
This is my in progress. Those are my work gaming tables, and those are about 1,000 painted Infinity minis. So.
Well, be jealous. Be very jealous.
I am.
That's what I do. Is the circle of life. Is I just paint more minis until I fill up a house, and then I build a new house. It's like a hermit crab.
Well, you bought the mountain, so you have room for that.
So you just got to hire a few dwarves to dig under the mountain, so he has more room.
Yeah, but that's how you get Balrogs.
True. We're such nerds. It's okay though.
So, what's the funniest or weirdest story you've had as an interaction with a fan, John?
I think it's probably when Larry and I.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
When Larry and I were doing our book tour right at the beginning, we were down at a bookstore in Arizona, in Phoenix somewhere, and we had a signing coming up, and we were waiting around. We were just chatting, waiting around. I was explaining to somebody my book, which is that there are these, not everything is as it seems, and there are these beings, these immensely powerful beings that are in control, and basically they're hurting humans. And this dude comes up to me glassy-eyed, and he's like, "It's true. Your book is true. Your book is true." And then he proceeded to tell me about the lizards of the hollow earth. So I was like, okay, awesome. Larry's got some stand-up dudes over there talking guns. I got the lizards of the hollow earth guy. So that's the wildest. I haven't run into anything else like to top that one yet.
I remember that because I have a ton of fans in Arizona, and they're all gun nuts, right? And so they'd all come. I was like talking to like 6 or 7 guys, and we look over, and John is just like flummoxed because this guy is there going off about the reptoids and the secret reptoid plot and every mind control rays, and we're all just looking at poor John as he's talking to this guy who's obviously like severely schizophrenic, and John's just like, oh, I'm glad I got 6 gun nuts right here.
It was so fun. And that's the first time I'd heard the lizards, the reptoid theory. So then I went home and researched it, and I was like, hey, if some glassy-eyed dude that comes up to you in a Barnes & Noble, so.
Oh, that was the weirdest. Yeah.
You cannot pick your fans. They pick you.
So can you top that, Larry? That's kind of hard.
No, I can't top that. I mean, I've had some weird ones, and I've had some crazy people threaten me. Well, as you guys know, you've seen me on the internet, and there's been places where I've signed where I've made sure I've had friends in the crowd or cops that I know will be there, just kind of hanging out, just because that kind of crazy. But as far as absolute weirdness, yeah, that guy he pegged the weirdo meter, man. I was just glad he was focused on John and not me. Because I would be like, my book's about the conspiracy theory about secret monsters. I kept my mouth shut at that point.
It's coast to coast radio, man. That's us.
That was crazy. And in fact, me and Mike Cooper, our series is about all the conspiracy theories on coast to coast, basically, because it's the secret war between the Illuminati and Majestic is the background of these novels. And even then, we got nothing nearly as crazy as what John got at just a random Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
So all of the fans of that series, if you're listening, and I'm assuming you are, you need to, the next time you see him, see if you can out crazy the crazy.
No, please don't. It gets weird enough.
You're not going to win friends and influence people.
I've never had to pepper spray anybody at a book signing yet. Please don't make me start.
I will admit, Barnes & Noble sometimes gets some unique characters. And I say that. I was a sales associate there for a while.
Yeah, they do. They do.
But, local flavor, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So normally we would ask them to list everything that they've written, but since they did that in their introduction, we're going to jump right in to talking about Gunrunner. So where did the premise for this universe come up with? How did you come up with the idea? Was it psychedelics, a Ouija board, overindulging in expired funeral potatoes? So can you guys spill it? Whichever one of you had the brainchild for this?
Let me start, Larry, and then you can do the second part. So Larry and I had done presentations at conferences before. How to write 3 killer things you need to know how to write killer stories, those types of things. And there was a conference in Utah, and I pitched an idea to them about we want to teach people how to write an action plot. And they said, yeah, that sounds great. We'd love to have you and Larry do that. But I knew, from having done this before and done it with Larry, and we wanted to have audience participation, I knew there's not enough time to start from the ground floor and then build it up, and especially not when we're trying to teach them how to plot. And so we needed to have a story premise, a story idea together to bring to the conference in order to be able to show them how to plot. So I went over to Larry's house, and we're sitting there on the couches and chatting. And Larry's son, Joe, was about 11 or 10 or 11, right, Larry? Somewhere around. He was about 11, and he's sitting on the stairs, just kind of listening in. You could see the top of his head. He was just sitting there listening in. And I said, okay, so what do we want to do? And I asked a question about a type, and Larry immediately says, hey, Joe, what's cool? And Joe pops up and says, giant robots, bandits, and murderers. And Larry and I looked at each other and we're like, oh, dang, that is cool. So we ran with that seed. And in about 30, 40 minutes, we had the premise for a terrific story. And that's what we took to the conference. And then we did audience participation and we built a plot with that. And then nothing happened, right? We looked at each other after that and we're like, man, if we ever got around to writing this would be a great book. But he was busy with his stuff. I was busy with mine. So, Larry, why don't you take it from there?
Well, and Baen Books loves doing collaborations, and so they love teaming authors up. And I have done a lot. I've done a lot more than most writers, and they work pretty good for me. And I had just wrapped up a collaboration with Sarah Hoyt, Monster Hunter Guardian, and it came out really good. And so Tony Weisskopf asked if I had any other collaborations I would like to pitch to her. And the very first thing that popped into my head was this one with John from when we had worked together. And then I had a second one I pitched to her also that it was from a different project I came up with, the guy named Steve Diamond. So I pitched her two projects, one sci-fi, one fantasy. And she immediately was like, wow, yeah, okay, those both sound good. I'll buy them both. And so I emailed John and I was like, hey, man, remember that panel we did? With the giant robots and the murderers and the bandits, and he's like, great, yeah, that was great fun. I was like, want to go ahead and write that book? Yeah,
no pressure though.
Years later, and then it took a while to actually, we got the contract, and it took a while to fit it in our schedules and then work on it, and so I mean, this book didn't come out until probably 5 years after we had the original talk about it. So. That just kind of shows the process. It takes a while, and the way we did this collaboration was I did like the big outline, and then kicked it to John. John did the rough draft, so John did most of the heavy lifting on word count, and then he kicked it back to me, and then I chopped some out, biffed some up, kicked it back to him. He kicked it back to me, so on and so forth, and did that for several months back and forth until we wound up with Gunrunner, and I'm really proud of it. I think it came out really good. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I enjoyed writing it, and so far it seems like people have really enjoyed reading it. So they're getting great.
That was a fun one.
It's a good blend of the two of you, I think, because there are definite moments when I'm like, that had to have been John, and there are definite moments of that was definitely Larry.
Yeah, true. And also, always my goal with the collaboration is it's never perfectly clear who wrote what. You know what I mean? I like to, ideally it's a blend of the two authors. It's a product different than either one of us would have created on our own.
I know, but I blame you on all the gun jargon.
Kinda.
Well, what's funny is already in some reviews, there are people who are trying to guess and they're getting it wrong. So it really is what Larry said. There's of course flavor from both of us, and we could go back and point to them, but it becomes it's a different animal, isn't it, Larry? It is. It's just a different animal.
I actually wrote a little article I wrote a blog post about collaborating, and I used Gunrunner as an example, and it was because somebody had given us a really dumb review. It was one of those hate reviews because it came out so fast after the book came out that it was pretty obvious the guy just skimmed the beginning so that he could so he could talk about enough stuff to complain about, so it didn't sound like an obvious fake review, so he could hurry up and give it 1 star, which is funny because then the next 500 reviews are 4 or 5 star, but it was so funny because of how ass backwards the guy got it, because very specifically he said that he was like, oh, it's clear that because he once again he'd only read like the first 60 pages. It was what he could tell, and he was all going off about how this is just Larry Correia clearly had no hand in this. He just farmed it out to John Brown, and he's citing the intro. Well, here's the kicker, and John knows this, and I know this. Originally, this book didn't have an introductory chapter. It started in what would actually be chapter 2, was actually chapter 1. And it wasn't until the editing process at the very end that Tony Weisskopf said, guys, this book really needs a prologue. She's not normally a prologue person, but she said, really, the way you guys have the story, her editing advice was, you guys really need a prologue. At the time, John was busy. We talked about it a little bit. He had an idea, I had an idea, but I went ahead and I took a shot at it. And so the whole first chapter that this guy was complaining about had no influence by me was actually the longest single part of the book that was me uninterrupted. And so he was like, "Oh, Mr. Mind Reader, you're not as smart as you think, are you, buddy?" This is that first 18 pages or whatever was straight up was the very last thing we wrote during the editing process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, critics.
What are you gonna do?
They suck.
I think sometimes they just want to be mean because they think it makes them sound smart.
It's funny because pretty much for me, as soon as a book comes out, as soon as a book is listed on Goodreads, before the book is out, often before I finish the book, it's got 1-star reviews. So I have that going for me.
How? That should be banned.
Yeah,
well, because
they're just jerks, so it's okay. I don't care.
They do it that way because legitimate reviews from people that get the early copies to have the reviews sort of ready. And so they have to open it, but there's really no way, unless you're going to the publisher's website specifically, for them to weed out that from the cranks. So I get it logistically. It'd be a pain in the butt to do it, but
I actually don't mind the cranks, because to me, business-wise, the more obnoxious the crank is, the more I can make fun of it on the internet, the more I use it to sell books.
This is true. And we used to do this. We took this section out because there was just it wasn't as well received. But one of the things we said in the old one, it was a Sci-Fi Shenanigans, was you can sometimes learn more about a book, whether it's for you or not, from the 1-star reviews than you can from the 5 stars. So if someone says, this guy cusses too much and that's your thing, you don't really care. Well, sweet, Right. So that some of my favorite reviews were actually the 1 stars.
Oh yeah.
So, but speaking of reviews, let's talk about that cover for a second. So how did that glorious image come to be? What's the origin story for that book cover?
Larry, you know more about that than I do. This was done. Wasn't this done before we had turned the book in?
The book, they had just, so they need, basically the sucky thing about covers is they got to get such an early jump on that to get publicity stuff out, especially behind the scenes amongst booksellers and wholesalers and catalogs and stuff. They usually have the covers out a lot of times before the book is done, especially if it's a guy like me who's just got back-to-back releases. And so a lot of times my covers aren't done yet. And so I had given the outline and the rough draft to the artist, but it was still really rough. We didn't have the finale down yet. So we had a giant monster in it. But this was not at all how he described the monster originally. And so then this cover came out, and this is the editing process. So guess what the monster looks like now, John? And I'm like, all right, the monster's got tentacles now, baby. Boom. So that's just part of the process. Yeah, and so it's kind of funny. The downside of this cover, though, is it's a monster, and I'm known as the monster guy, that's kind of my stereotype. And so this book comes out, people see the giant monster on the cover, so they think it's a monster novel primarily, but it's a science fiction novel. And so, but the whole purposes of a cover is to get people to click on the thumbnail on Amazon or to pick it up long enough in the bookstore to read the back cover. So in that respect, it works fine.
Yeah.
Awesome. So why don't you give us the 30-second elevator pitch for the book? Whichever one of you. I'll let you fight for the right.
Did you say go for it, John?
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot, man.
No pressure.
So basically, this is a story about a guy who was a a child soldier. He'd been impressed into service. Well, I guess he had been impressed. Well, he'd been impressed. He was a child soldier. We'll just leave it at that. And was a hero, and then was totally not a hero. So this is a messed up guy, and he's had this captain take him under his wing, and that's what you get in the introduction, right? You kind of get a little bit of a backstory to understand where Jackson Rook comes from, and they've got this business. And this was one of the original ideas that we had way back when we first had this. They've got this business where they're doing they're in a righteous cause. They're supplying guns to the oppressed masses who can't fight back, right? Who the guns are being withheld from them. And so they're black market smugglers. The problem is they've got some weaponry that they've just sold to somebody, and it looks like maybe they might have sold it to the wrong side. So now what do, right? So that's kind of the basis of the story. But there's a lot more to it. The location of where all this happens is fascinating and was a lot of fun to write, as were a lot of the other characters along with it. I don't know, Larry, you got anything to add to that description?
I don't know, man. I suck at pitching. No,
the story got picked up, so you didn't suck too bad.
No, it's basically the story of a crew, this motley gang of badass space pirates who go around stealing advanced weapon systems to supply them to the people who aren't allowed to have them. And in this particular case, they supply a guy who turns out to be a total scumbag warlord despot who's actually oppressing his people. And Jackson, our hero, comes from a background of being oppressed, and so when he sees this kind of thing going down, he has a real hard time with it.
Yeah,
and it gets a little nuts, and it's on a planet full of giant monsters. We get to have giant robot fights, and we had a lot of fun with this. Basically, every sci-fi trope you can think of, we shoved into this book.
It is triple-licious, but I truly enjoyed it.
Not lightsabers, Larry. There were no lightsabers.
That's true. There's no lightsabers. We didn't go with laser guns. We went with projectile weapons. And
it sounds like you're going to be putting lightsabers in the next one, then.
I know we might have to.
No, but on a challenge, because somebody on a Facebook page, specifically for Infinity, Cisca, and somebody saying, "Oh, flamethrowers in space are stupid," and I was like, I took that as a personal challenge now to figure out a way to make an effective zero-G space flamethrower. So that's going in the net. I mean, that I have to do that. That's just a thing now because a guy on the internet told me it was stupid. So I was
have you figured it out yet?
Name, but I'm going to kick his ass now and have a zero-G space flamethrower and make it awesome.
Yeah,
have you figured it out?
So what?
Have you figured it out yet?
Yeah, I actually posted. I posted on Facebook to get all the physicists arguing about it. They came up with really good ideas.
Nice. And Elon Musk will build one, and we'll all be able to buy it.
Oh, hell yeah, man. I'm Team Elon. Get me off this rock.
So what makes this story special and unique? Other than being completely triple-licious.
Well, what makes it special and unique is that it's written by Correia and Brown. That's what makes it special and unique.
They are so modest and so humble. Everybody says so, I swear.
Actually, it sounds silly, but that is a true point. Because, the thing is, we're like chefs. Every chef has a different flavor, in their dish. They're going to have their different spin on it. And so basically every book's going to be special and unique depending on who put it together. And in this case, I've known John for 10 years or over 10 years. And, we've talked about doing a project together and we've brainstormed a lot together. We've talked a lot about writing. We spent a lot of hours in a car together, driving across America, talking writing philosophy, so it was fun to get together and be able to do this stuff. I think that does kind of make it unique.
Yeah. Well, I think what might be, there are a couple of things that we tried to blend, and I don't know if it made it unique. There are thousands and thousands of books being published every year, but I can say that there was something about this that I really enjoyed, and that was the fact that we wanted it to be high action and an adventure. We wanted to have fun. At the same time, there are a lot of high action adventure space stories where they play fast and loose with physics and other things like that. And we wanted to make sure that we tried as best we could to, whenever we did things, to come up with plausible explanations. Now, there are some things like how are we going to get from point A to point B? Well, I wasn't personally interested in multi-generation ships. And I was like, let's not do that, Larry. Let's do gates. Somebody figured something out about gate because I want to be able to get out to the stars. I wasn't interested in that. And Larry was kind enough to say, well, okay, yeah, let's go with that. So we have something like, we have a gate, which is unexplained black box technology. But for other things, we were trying to work it out. For example, with the mechs, we wanted to have mech suits in this thing. And we both were like, when would a mech suit make sense? Because if I'm in a battle space, if I'm on land and I'm standing up 40 feet into the air, walking around, like that isn't going to make sense. I'm just going to make a big target out of myself. So when would it make sense? And we went through a process trying to figure out, well, in this situation, mechs would make a lot of sense probably. And so it was that, but it was just combined with having a lot of fun. This isn't one of those science fiction stories where you come away with, I don't know, this isn't an intellectual exercise. It's not an Larry and I mean, there are certainly things you can think about after you get done, but it's not an intellectual puzzle, that type of an exercise. It's big, it's fun, and we got a lot of cool things in it. So
I'm just proud that we were able to write Space Combat and get David Weber to read it and give us a positive blurb without yelling at us for our bad science.
I was impressed because there were no waves of missiles.
Oh man, no. Though we did have quite a few missiles at the end, but not waves and waves. There just wasn't that much extra room on these cargo ships so you could hide them from customs agents. Though I remember at the end, though, for the space fight scene, I remember having a spreadsheet open with missile speeds and railgun speeds and distances and how many seconds it would take to close, X thousand kilometers. And when I was looking at that, thinking, man, I'm getting a little too David Webery here.
I'm Team Hand Wavy.
Tear this down. My fans don't want to do math.
I don't want to do math when I read. I want to enjoy the story.
Well, as David says, David Weber will never tell a story where 3 words will do. David will use 5. Larry Correia will, if 3 words will do, Larry will use 1. So that's what he said about us. I think that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think the best insult I've ever seen on the Facebook was when somebody commented, wow, David didn't even waste 20 words on you. He just went, you're wrong. He goes, Chuck said it best, you're wrong. And that was it.
Wow. Everybody who knows David is like, oh, bless his heart. That guy just stick a fork in him. He is done.
Yeah. So I would say, what trope did you like best that you put in? What was your favorite trope that you did for this?
Wow.
Or your favorite twist on the trope, whichever one.
No, for me, it was fun just to do giant robots. Giant robot fights. Total trope. We went full giant robot fights. I love that.
Oh man, I love the mech, the giant robot stuff. Battle minions. Minions on this one. I don't know. I haven't seen anything like it, and they are just fun. These little. There's a character in this book. Her name is Jane, and she's basically a combat controller. If you want to think about it that way, she's the IT person. But she's not. I mean, and she is a little bit nerdy, and she's a little bit techie. But she's more. I don't know. How would you describe her, Larry? She's not nerdy in a. What was that?
She's the angel of death in this.
She's a little odd in the angel of death way, and she's got these robots, these killer robots, and she's named them all these cutesy names: Fifi, Mimi, Ron, and they will slit your throat, right?
Which one of us decided? I can't remember which one of us decided to make them cute. We made them chibi. We made them all cute robots. Was that me or was that
I think you started
idea?
coming up with cute names, and I think I ran with it. And then you added some more. So I think what started with you.
I remember the bear. I made the bear like adorable. I remember adding the adorable teddy bear of murder. So it was like a little walking teddy bear robot with chainsaw hands. And Ron, wasn't it? Ron was the bear.
It's Ron.
Ron.
Yeah, I think I came up with Fifi. You came up with
You came
Ron.
up with Fifi. Yeah. Fifi was people love Fifi. Fifi is this adorable, like a pea-size, like little robot ladybug looking thing with a laser. Just like will crawl up on your neck and laser open your arteries. I mean, she is so violent.
So we had a good time. We had a good time with that. There's I don't know if it's a twist or not with the big town space, and this is you know how when you get up into space frequently things are very sterile, they're very orderly, it's big, it's epic, it's like that. And maybe I know that Blade Runner was grungy, but this is an orbital that is, it's like ghetto.
We went full space Mogadishu.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
Murder
serious.
Barbie and Space Motogishu. I like it.
It was because it was like basically the remains of this 11-kilometer long colony ship that they turned into an orbital, and basically they just started building shanty towns in it, and it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing, and they just keep adding on to it until it just turned into this giant, orbital city of kind of chaos.
Yeah.
And there's decent people trying to make a life in there, but there's a lot of scumbags preying on them. And yes, we basically went full space Mogadishu. I mean, it's run by a warlord. That was fun. I love the warlord, by the way. I love that character. That guy was awesome.
Yeah, warlord's awesome. So he's fun. Another trope is, a lot of science fiction, or at least space opera, it's exploration. You're finding new places. And, I think we did a little something that was fun for us was this planet called Swindle. Here they are exploring space. And the way that we organized it was that you had this International Space Federation of all the nations that got together. And what would happen is if somebody would finance an exploration of a place, then as they started assigning these things out and selling them, they could recoup some of that money. Well, these people went out to this place. They sent back all these amazing pictures, and they called the planet Lush because it was just so beautiful. But this planet... So you get this ship that goes out there, all these people with their life savings, they're not going to be able to come back. And this planet wants to kill you. The air wants to kill you. The flora wants to kill you. The fauna wants to kill you. It's a very hostile place, and that's where a lot of the action occurs. So it's pretty fun. So
basically Australia in space.
Oh, turned up to 11 and broke the knob off and then threw dinosaurs on it. I mean, it's nuts.
You had me at dinosaurs.
It's so bad. This planet, like literally, like John says, it's out to kill you. Like, I don't think we ever had a single animal on this planet that wasn't just a bastard. Like, everything was eating everything else, and everything wanted to eat people. And if they were smaller than you, they wanted to gang up and eat you. And it wasn't even vice versa, because there was only like one animal on the whole planet that was edible to humans, but we were edible to everything, so it wasn't even fair.
Yeah, that sounds like somebody really rolled a one.
Yeah, there was this one kind of shrimp thing or bug about the size of a jumbo shrimp that was edible. That was about it. Everything else wanted to just sting you in the eye.
Yeah, we had a good time with that. There's just a lot of fun things, and I think that's one of the operating principles that we had going into this. It started with Joe. Hey, Joe, what's cool? And as we were developing this, the initial ideas together and just spitballing, and hey, what about this? Oh my gosh, this would be awesome. This would be awesome. There were in fact a lot of ideas that we couldn't fit into this novel that we originally were just like, oh, this would be so awesome, but it just, you can't fit everything in.
But there will be a sequel?
Depends. We're waiting to see how it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see.
It's still new enough. I think it's done really good, but we'll have to wait and see. Because honestly, the thing is, I'm busy. John's busy. So if the book is popular and people want more, then I'd be happy to revisit it.
Cool. Oh,
Well,
I'm
to
sure
give
that
you an
there are
idea-
many people who are really relieved if they've read that, if they've read the book, hearing that.
Well, I just told John about this. So, I mean, basically, this is both of our universe, you know. But I told John about this a couple weeks ago. I got approached by Audible to do a novella for them, and you know, just a 20,000 word story. And so it was a sci-fi, and so I went ahead and set it in the same universe, even though it's on as Gunrunner, even though it's on a totally different planet, and it's probably about 100 years later than our current timeline, but it's just in a totally different part of the galaxy. And I haven't even, but it was just a couple lines of dialogue that we had in Gunrunner about lost colonies, about how, because the way the gates work, the gates would kind of aim your ship at a point in space and fling you out there faster than light. And every now and then, if the gate screwed up, it would launch a ship to who knows where, and people were just gone. And so I wrote a story about one of those. It was supposed to go to this really nice planet, and for whatever reason, it missed. And they wound up in the middle of deep space, and the nearest place they could get, nearest system they could get to was like a 10-year trip from where they were. And they made it barely, and but the only sort of habitable planet there really, really, really sucks. And so I'm writing about this lost colony about 100 years later, and it's actually a gritty cop show story. It's just a murder mystery story, but I set it in the Gunrunner universe basically. But the only thing that's really tied in is the way the gates work.
Yeah.
So yeah, me and John will probably be picking through this franchise for ideas for a long time. I got to send the story to you, John. I just finished the rough draft today.
Oh, that'd be cool.
You heard it here first.
There's a lot. There's a lot that can be done in this universe. And one of the things that we did, you know, as we were thinking about it, we were like, you know, we don't want to write this hundreds and hundreds of years in the future because, I mean, that's fine. There's stories that are great like that. But a lot of time the tech, it's just black box and we're back into fantasy, which is awesome and we love it. But we wanted to have this be a little bit closer to our own current time. So, you know, over the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years, somebody discovers gate technology. Imagine that. And then what happens, right? What happens from there? So it's still, you know, we still got guns. We still got guns. We still got a lot of things that that we would recognize. And for me, it's a fun mix. I think that's kind of like the Firefly feel. It's not quite as epic as maybe Star Wars is, but it's still got that Firefly little bit of a gritty feel to it.
So you've told us about the main character. Are there any secondary characters that you love that are pretty memorable for you as the writer? Either one of you can answer if you've got anybody.
Well, there's a bunch, actually. We mentioned Jane. Actually, I really, really like the captain of the ship, Captain Holloway. It's kind of fun because one thing was when you're writing a book together, it really helps for you to agree upon like an actor or someone you know as if they would be playing that character. That way you could keep it kind of consistent between the two of you. And so for the character who was the captain of this pirate ship, basically, we picked Nick Searcy from Justified. You know, the
Okay.
chief deputy on Justified. And so he's this guy from North Carolina. He's a normal-looking dude. He just wants to get back to Earth. He wants to retire from being a space pirate. But he's a man with a code. And he's a good guy. He's a moral guy in an amoral business. And it was kind of funny. So then when John and I were trying to name the ship, we just knew the captain was from North Carolina. And he wanted to go back to North Carolina, so the ship needed a North Carolina name. So John had come up with a name. I'd come up with a name, but we couldn't really come up with like a name that we both liked. And so I threw it out on Facebook, and I was like, "Hey guys, if you're gonna have a ship from North Carolina, you know, what would it be named?" And I threw it out there, and everybody's like, "So Nick Searcy, the actor we based the character on, jumps on. He goes, it'd be called the Tar Heel." And I looked at John. I was like,
"That's it.
We can't.
It's the Tar Heel."
I mean, he's the captain. He's literally the captain himself. Got on to Facebook and told me what the ship would be named. Done.
Did he know he was the inspiration?
No, at the time he did not.
That is awesome. That makes it even
He
cooler.
knows now. I sent him a copy. John and I signed a copy, and I mailed it to him.
That's awesome.
No, he's read a bunch of my books. He's a great guy.
That's awesome.
Okay, so you mentioned the warlord. Is that the main bad guy, or was there other bad guys that they have to face throughout the course of this novel?
Oh, he's
Or-
the main bad guy, but there's several.
Okay. We don't want spoilers because you want people to read your book, obviously.
Well, John mentioned the charity red shirt list earlier. That's just where people would send me their names or their nicknames and a few little factoids about them, and I try to get this stuff into a book. And John was going through and picking names. Well, we needed like a bad guy space captain. We needed a guy who was like a captain of a different kind of space. You know, like these are a little more stereotypical pirates.
A thug.
Yeah, and this guy's name was Jeet Prunkard. And that's his name. His real name is something else, but his Jeet is what he goes by. And his Jeet Prunkard. And John picked that. And I looked at it, I was like, that is the best bad guy space pirate name ever. So I don't know if Mr. Prunkard has seen this. But and one of the things he mentions, he's got a bulldog. He's got this ugly, slobbery bulldog.
Overweight bulldog, yeah.
Yeah, so we gave the space pirate a bulldog. So they're in 0G. There's no artificial gravity on this ship unless it's accelerating. And so he's just up there with his bulldog, taking care of business.
Floating around beside him.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's going to be
all right. No, but I do tell people I want to be the Joe Buckley of my generation. So I'm working on getting my friend authors to kill me off.
Yeah, we've all killed some Joe Buckleys. I killed Joe Buckley 3 times in one book.
I'm not jealous. Totally not jealous. But I'll catch up with him. I think I'm at like 15 now.
Wow.
Of my friends that have killed me, but I've got a lot to catch up with him.
Terry Mason likes killing you in very embarrassing ways.
Hey, I am a vice admiral in the Royal Manticore Navy. I will have you know.
Oh, that is awesome. Did you make yourself a uniform?
Say what?
Did you make yourself a uniform?
No, I have not.
So this is the fun question that we like to ask. So you've put your characters through some horrific situations. You've put them on planets that want to eat them alive. So if your characters ever stepped out of the pages of the book and they realized that you were the person that did that to them, how do you think they would react?
Jackson would probably step on us with a giant robot.
That's probably right.
I think chapter 1 alone earned you that.
Jane would just kill us with a swarm of vicious little robots. So I think I'd rather be stepped on by the one big one than Ron with the chainsaw hands.
That's probably what would happen. I hope I don't meet him.
Yeah, I think the prologue definitely earned some squishing.
Well, I just figured at Larry, at least, he's probably got enough guns that maybe he could hold them off for a few seconds.
Oh, no, these things, we're talking, these are some big war machines, man. I'm toast. Yeah.
All right, Cisca, the next one is you.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the world? Because for these kind of series, the world is as much a character in and of its own self.
Oh, no, we talked about Swindle quite a bit. It's so basically the 2 main settings of this book are Swindle and Big Town. So Swindle's the planet itself that they were supposed to live on, and then Big Town is the orbital where they're kind of stuck because they can't live on the planet. I don't know, John. Anything else we haven't talked about on that?
Well, I guess maybe I don't know, man. I mean, I can get all technical. Like Swindle's the gravity is a little bit less than Earth, so you can get taller trees and that type of thing. And we also thought about convergent evolution. So, they're going to be for different tasks. You're going to have similar evolutionary shapes and stuff like that. I mean, there's a resistance group there. The original settlers, one of the big beefs here, I guess maybe we can talk about this, like, the original settlers went out there, and the planet was billed as lush. But once they got there, of course, it was a total bust. So the actual, what everybody refers to this planet as, is Swindle. So it's the planet Swindle. And there are a number of original, and they were up in these orbitals. They cobbled them together. They made a life, but things degraded, and there were warlords, and there were battles. And there were some of these original settlers that had original claims to the land down there. And what they discovered was there was this chemical there called CX. And that's very vital to the gate technology using in the gates. And so suddenly, oh my gosh, right? Now this property is worth something. Well, There are settlers that are living down subterranean in subterranean habitats down on this planet that's highly vegetation, and the warlord up in the orbital basically wants to extinguish him so he can take over the CX. So there's a lot of cool tension and stuff like that on this planet, and the orbital, of course, we put a lot of cool ideas with the orbital, like where would you get a water source out in space?
We committed a lot of war crimes during this.
Yeah.
We did a lot of horrible things to a lot of decent people.
Yeah. So I think for Larry, you got this planet, it's got super tall trees, tons of vegetation, tons of aggressive fauna. And then you got this big town, which is, like Larry said, Mogadishu in space, in a space orbital, one of those tubes that's rotating. And I think people will get a feel from that. I think they'll get a feel from that. It's a fun setting.
A giant robot fight scene inside of a giant tube where you can look up and see the street, that's like a mile that way, but it's right above your head. It actually causes some challenges for fight scenes. That was actually kind of fun, So you got these robots with basically tank equivalent weapons.
There are some old Gundams you should have watched doing this research.
Well, yeah, because it was like Battlefield, but it's to take a Battlefield but roll it into a tube, so it's 3-dimensional, and it made for some interesting firefights.
Yeah,
I had fun with that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there are creatures. How did you guys go about designing the creatures? Whole cloth, or I knew you did say you had to edit in details from the cover.
Well, yeah, on the big one. So basically, like John said, is we had it so there's different areas of convergent evolution. There's different kinds of monsters. There's insect equivalents and bird equivalents. Oh, my battery's dying. Sorry, I got my low power notice there. No, so we had all these just nasty. Basically, the whole goal there was every monster had to be nasty in some way. And one point, John made up this kind of bug called the Wallard. They live in these trees. And they're just these nasty, basically stinging cockroaches. They're venomous, stinging cockroaches, imagine. And they look kind of like trilobites. And our main character at one point decides, because he's stuck on, I don't want to give too many spoilers for it. He's trying to climb up a tree to see if he can figure out where he is and get a look around. And this is when he discovers that Wallards live in the trees. And he gets just these things try to just murder him. And we had all sorts of different creatures. The Caliban was a recurring one. Imagine a cross between a horse and an alligator. So kind of galloping alligator type monsters. And then the big one was the kaiju. It was the peak of evolution. Once you get the gravity's lower, so we could get away with bigger creatures without violating physics too much. And so this thing is basically the king. This is the king of its biosphere. Nothing screws with it. It eats whatever it wants, whenever it wants. And it's basically, it is the old god of this world. And at the very end, they get to look into its eyes. There's a great scene. I don't want to give anything away, but it's just very much, it's badass.
Well, before you can give it away, is there anything else about Gunrunner that you'd like to share with us that we haven't asked?
Oh man, I don't know, John. You talk a lot.
I think the key thing is that it was meant to be action adventure in space, and it's just, for me, it was just a ton of fun to write. It was just tons and tons of fun to write, and I hope that comes through. And I think if you look at the reviews that we've been getting, it's come through. And that's what people are enjoying about this story.
Yeah, I would agree. We set out to have a good time, because my philosophy of writing is it's contagious. If I'm having a good time creating it, that will bleed through on the page, and then people will have a good time reading it or listening to it. It's I call it contagious enthusiasm. And so honestly, that's why you can always tell if a writer's having a bad time when he's writing a book, or if a writer's really struggling. It comes through. It comes through in the page. So yeah. I try to be downright gleeful as I'm doing horrible things to decent people.
All right, that could be the show cover, doing horrible things to decent people, the Larry Correia way. So obviously your battery's dying, so you're going to have to go. But luckily for you, we're at the end of our question. So as we wrap this up, Larry, how can listeners or viewers contact or find you on the interwebs?
Best thing to do is go to my blog. It's Monster Hunter Nation. And I have a newsletter there. You can sign up. The newsletter is strictly book stuff. Or you can follow me there. I've been kicked off of Facebook so much that I'm not really on there anymore, though there is a really active fan page on there still. I come back for one day and then get banned for 30. I'm also active on MeWe. Yeah, but the best place to get a hold of me is my blog or sign up for my newsletter on my blog.
Okay.
Yeah. The best place for me is at my site, johndbrown.com.
Okay, and those will all be in the show notes. I will get those for you, dear listener. You can find us on our website, which is anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blade. Anchor.fm/blasters tack and tack blades. Our Twitter is twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show. Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We even sometimes check. I checked this morning. No guarantees because we forget a lot. And then you can find us on our Facebook group, Blasters and Blades Podcast, on the search bar, facebook.com/Blasters and Blades Podcast. And if you want to help keep the lights on, you can make sure to put in the comment for the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. And now it's to you, Cisca. Wrap it up.
So thank you for spending your precious time with us. For the absentee comic artist, Nick Garber, J.R. Handley, and myself, thank you for joining us with Larry Correia and John Brown. We'll be back next week where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom.